At the beginning of the 20th century, many Jews were leaving their religion. Europe was teeming with new ideologies. Young, smart men and women were abandoning Judaism for the sake of other isms. Each one of these theories has offered a new way of creating the world order and ensuring a bright future for humanity. Today, we can laugh at the people who followed these ideas, but they sincerely believed in them. They were making great sacrifices for their sake, and they were convinced that they're saving the world. For centuries, people have practiced various religions. They are all different, but they all were about dedicating a person's life to something higher. They called on people to serve something above themselves, often at the expense of great personal sacrifices. Fast forward 100 years. The concept of living for the sake of something higher than yourself is not only not practiced, but is also completely forgotten. Today, it is hard to imagine how one can follow an ideology that somehow inconveniences his life. The idea that a person needs to, first of all, live for himself seems to be almost self-evident. This does not mean that in the past no one has lived for themselves. It just means that when people did it, they at least were uncomfortable to admit it. It was not the cultural norm because they understood that they should devote themselves to something higher. It does not mean that all religious people in the generations earlier or today give themselves over completely to some higher ideals. No, it just means that they at least know that this is something to strive for. Today, in the Western world, living just for the sake of your pleasures has not only become the norm, but it is also celebrated. People romanticize living just for the sake of living. Of course, people also do something for their neighbors, for the community. They give some donations, but all of this only after they have satisfied their own desires. For the founders of the United States of America, the idea of freedom was the cornerstone of a new country. But what freedom were they referring to? The freedom of religion. In other words, a person can choose what higher ideal he wants to devote himself to. Today, in America, they also talk a lot about freedom, but what kind of freedom are they talking about? Whenever freedom is mentioned, they speak about the freedom to do what I want for myself. In the Western world today, they talk a lot about bettering of our society. But why should people improve their society? The motivation, the reason they give is so you can live in a better world. Again, it's all for yourself. Today, there are also some people who leave Judaism. Thank God, there are very few of them. Their numbers cannot be compared with the wave of assimilation a century ago. But why are these people abandoning their religion? I have not met yet a single Orthodox Jew who said, I believe that the ethics of Kant are more important and more correct than the Torah, and therefore I'm leaving Judaism to live according to Kant. I have not heard of a single person who said, I believe that everyone should devote their lives to saving penguins in Africa. One second, I'm not sure why there are penguins in Africa, but it doesn't matter. And I'm moving to Sahara to do this, and therefore I am abandoning Judaism. Those few who leave the Jewish faith do so not because they decided to devote themselves to some other ideal, but because they decided to devote themselves to themselves. Not because they found some idea which they think is more important than the Torah, but because they believe that there is nothing more important than themselves. If a Jew adopts such a position, this is, of course, a failure of us, rabbis, teachers, parents, because we were unable to convey to this person that one cannot live for himself. We spend a lot of energy explaining why the Torah is better than other ideologies, but our competitor is not other ideologies, but the absence of it. We are not competing against the desire to devote oneself to another higher ideal. We are competing against the desire to devote oneself to himself. But as we can see, while a very small percentage of Torah-observant Jews leave Judaism, a very large number of Jews become Torah observant. Perhaps this is because people see that life for the sake of itself is empty, that in spite of what the surrounding culture is preaching, selfishness is not romantic. People want to feel the meaning of their existence. But if you devote yourself to your existence, if you eat to work and work to eat, if you are devoting yourself only to yourself, it is impossible to find any meaning in your existence.